Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurube. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurube. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Kande la ye gwe ye do kande ra ga jo za pon de chon ze che ye ya bo gwe ye lo sang se da je ba ne de je so de ye na ga se de be de che ze ba ma ye be zo ka ai lo de be so na ai je jo de ai ba ai je je ke ai jo ai jo zo she ai je je ge ja ai be lo je ke ai za ai na be ai je jo le she Ke ma ye ma ga nam ye ngo so so ra re ye je je ye wa de zo ya ve yo la cha ze lo de ya na ga de ga de a ra ga de a ra sa ma ga bo de so yo de ya na ga de ga de a ra ga de a ra sa ma ga bo de so yo de ya na ga de ga de a ra ga de a ra sa ma ga mo de so yo ge re dong da je ju xie wang da me de ne be gen da天邦之间，别动所求，大些天有所学别也有些没多照。Let me remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of altruistic motivation, we should all participate in this Lamrim discourse on the stages of path to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about a couple of pages from Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, volume number 3 in the English translation, page 307, to give you first the blessing of lineage masters in oral transmission, followed by explication.
Geshe Chula dene da de do ba na te do nyo lang sho da da ni nyo lang bo da xing da da de ya la nam xiu bo da yo no le so jo ba xie de da ni pung bo so le bi sha xi bi xi ba ba pung bo la sa wa ni di lang ra sha we le yen be sha wa yin je jo ba le ti xi Jigde Pumbo de Tijin, Jigde Labi Pumbota. Come the Deje Chu de Dajan Yolo Donile Lay Denisi Wong, she so dear. Shinda de Conan number doing Condi Dati Nibble Major. Rashi Jude Major Majeba, Chever, Bajeba, Gondovati, Dakiwa, and Kiba, the Dade Rashi, Meza, very bit on the Honda, Dal Rashi Kubati, it's a rewadi, Dadi, Minala, Soba, which is in Yiba, Nachi, Cheddar, Yiba, Juru, Titana, Dagi. Dayo da yana shimi dagi wo yana me de nenjo da dagi ra shin ga ya ma me bo kong ma me bo ko ba me bo kong ba le number ma me ba tong ale number je ba je de se ba ma me ba tong as tin tong as de
No, take it again.
Da dagi juba da dagi wa ine karsa na di bani be big ba na kong ba le number 2 George Simje kong se ai ye de
Engineer ke tata la tumus busy no. Nenjo bagi ken le dirwa ta me ba thong sana
da dagi da me to ri se ti kong so do
No, Nenjo ba da ta ge ba ta me to sana ene ke ka sa ko la number 2.
me ba karsa ma me ba na kong ba le number 2 ji thong le number is me sa is me de
No, so.
가지 다다 다고 가지 담에 통에는 타바 토르 시고로
No.
데네 제발 저라 제 저제발에 다니 여바 마이나 다게 여가지 제단 주벌레 자가지 제벨이 대제라메 바다제 다게 담에 바라 요미디 세나다다 티세레 다다다게 또다게 내저버데 넘버 2 줄 Heso Dala Shimeba be two the Gua Bajo told you that Jabani and Rajusin Bali Sheva Shao Sumba Rivatena my Killer Jayasan Dada Pumboji Pumbujeva Nia Shindis Jeva somebody Pumba number Lozoba Nanja Sheva Diva Tuba Pumbola Soba Naya. Rang sola soba namada bachega de la zabe cheve rashi me cheve sobe be ripe number 20 chewa 这对的以后的要我们也这个马这边大家别生活要吧，也得要把多把什么的吧。今天俺那这俺那些的没得这个今天那行业不得，也行业不得没不得不得啊的是说，今天就差别没我今天就差别没我们些别是这他有就我这个不么。那不是他妈的，那在生活这些东康熙现在吃东人家老是问了很大疼，天气好大个呢，今天你们在那到这的，好像在我的那边今天连续最明这些了，养老院的多少产业到那边对养老院的。养老院的队长3年多年，3年当年不有老师到有那个园丁进来一下当啊3年没了少不多的，真的现在那些这边那不都有明星天了现在决定都希望决定差别过呢也吧。学生都得了，康裕国呢就今天本地，也不得那么这么马大吧，也不可能了到吧下的。这康现在养老到养老金，老我说把这边的那呢，碰不了，从那我碰不呢养老金，当我有点钱当，钱是不赢了，全部老说把那个养老当我不老说把那样的。到底我到去上我当这样别让我说那边承认的，那不说老外的有的这个对着呢，老把这些把这上班的对呀，长期也好啥老外这玩意儿这玩意儿写多没呢，手机不行的，手机我带来行。带来养老我的那个养老金多了，我也是养老金了，带来讲养老多倍的，多倍没了我的不行的不行了的，你们多别跑去加入，这些结果来媳妇来了这些来叫我媳妇电叫我没到准备去呢，没等我现在媳妇不到。来他给我那老么我先把这些送给这些人找我都找不到，大家大家也到我猜不到，现在老说把他们这个我年纪没出去，平时对外去把咱的媳妇瞧我，他们就开始学的，现在通了就话是现在白的当没当白家，他的白教的咱那。前几这不刚刚的，他我是年度了，是不是？讲我是我抄的样子，我是我抄的样子，你的准备能听这用我妈的上升之后，原来我的刚要同他了，因为电影这一结婚多的成的8.9岁多，现在准备前几下就是重要嘛的事，我前几天我的一门去联邦国嘛的事，我的现在了哇，我的现在些他。这里头嘛，这些呀，这多可是，现在是。
别的名个那么钱多。
我的名个那的多少的哇？
我的送也的了。
名个那么的也给咱多少了？现在的投了，人些多，这个都来少来呀的的。有我的没我的多少了些。
现在这边给龙人不是的话，你做不上的下了吧？给。
那是的，因为这龙忙不多。
我的做不起。
听到了，他8.9岁多，可是8.9岁，咱可是这里，准备呢，前些天了，要么是要第8现在过呢，因为电影这就弄的这些，他这里的嘛可是啊。
实际你把背可是背过呢，那个是抗杀的，每个那么
你把的可玩的就是你把。
你把弄。
这个能给老些他。
后来俺得取消，俺得才能的弄。
工作老师。
Geshe read from page 307. volume number 3 in the English translation to page 311. That was to give us the blessing of lineage oral transmission of this text, Lamrim. We are back to page 307 where we left off. As you can see, those of you who have this text or the electronic version of it, we stopped with that long quote or citation from King of Concentration Sutra, Samadhiraja Sutra, which really provides us about 11 different examples to demonstrate or illustrate that a person or self lacks intrinsic reality. Okay? Of course, the main example that we have used is that of a chariot. Right? A chariot has 7 different parts, and therefore it's dependently existent. Nothing in any of its parts or among the parts we could find chariot existing intrinsically. Okay? And so we use that example to analyze how self or person, if we analyze it in 7 different ways, we couldn't find self or a person to exist intrinsically either. Okay? So that's how we connect the dots, so to speak, the example, to the meaning, because a very difficult point, that we have witnessed is how, things still exist and function even though they lack intrinsic existence or reality. Okay? Because essentialists believe that things must exist essentially or intrinsically, otherwise how could they exist and they function as they do? And here the Prasangikas are saying that actually nothing exists intrinsically, right? Everything lacks intrinsic reality. Nonetheless, everything exists and functions as they do. So in the absence of intrinsic reality, things still exist conventionally and they serve their function or the purpose. Because when we check with our everyday life experiences, we all go through ups and downs in life. We have this excitement, that kind of happiness, and then we that kind of sadness, depression. So these things, seems very real to us, like and all that. So how can we say like, these things don't exist at all? Because that's what the essentials are hearing all the time when we say that all these feelings, happiness, sadness, don't exist intrinsically. Like, what do you mean? This really exists because I have been through that. What do you mean? Well, the Prasangika is saying, we don't mean these things don't exist. These feelings do exist, but we are saying that they do not exist the way you think they exist intrinsically. But in the absence of intrinsic reality, all these, they exist. We are not denying that. And so if we look at that long citation from King of Concentration Sutra, the different 11 or 12, I think as a matter of fact, 12 examples are given, which includes magical creation, right? We already talked about it, how that magical creation or even reflection of face in the mirror has 2 dimensions. There's the ordinary dimension where we can understand the deceptive nature of reflection, right? Looks like my face is the mirror because that looks like me, but it isn't it? So that deceptive nature could be understood easily based on such examples, but what we find it difficult to understand is how things are also deceptive in nature, that they appear to us as intrinsically existent, but they do not exist in that way. That part is where we have difficulty, like, what? Yeah. So that's where we talked about, just kind of, recapitulating what we already talked about. And now we are back to page 307.
일반 명기 처벌을 주고는 주지 돈을 줘는 제대로 pomo서 버때는 신다 따바나 연라 때는 여월로 사이나 신다 여월은 뭐 보이면 되게 풍보다 나다 컴조다 제시 제시 저거 때네 나도 도배나 대다 여월랑자다 나는 여월로 뭐 신다는 때 연라 남 시버벌레 레서 줘봐 신도 나도 풍보다 레베 샤와시베 샤워보다 샤워보다 풍보라서 봐네 티 랑아체 레인베 샤와인데 죽벌레 Tijin Lakbe Pumbotang, come the Geshe, drove then Daya Nyala Yed, Nilele, then Shivo me Shesos, that Kajiteresha. Yena citizens, any piece to total enjoy the Ming Chaber said, Yena, the Yena Jen said, Shinda Javina, Shinda Corona, any Yena Jen said.
No.
That the Pomola Yenarva.
No.
Or this is Shatakunia, Shinda than the Yala Taba, Yala than the Shinda than Pintu Toro Goni Shire is.
No, sure.
Or dinner you consala any Pombo that comes gay to down the comes of use the cousin on the Pombo any because Geshe Rose really with that should not so much Yorba, that because Dosishan is in the Mambu Yorba. But the Tia Ganga didn't make no loss of the long Geshe, that's the any Lambo Boshe. She that Dadia Pumbo then Taba down Tabaris, she that Lemja Lambo Boshe, the Langin Shua Boshe. And then make the novels of Geshe Gaga Langja.
No.
She that Da then Langja Shavata, Langja Pumbo then Da Shavashin in the Pinto Gon Rugoris.
No.
Who did that long homage long do
No.
did it. That Jiwa is Pumbo the Dad, Jotajiwa is at the
No. So we are on page 307, and those who have the textbook or using the electronic version, the second subpoint reads, the example illustrates how the person is established under various names. So that's the subpoint. And so Geshe's explanation pertains to that passage under that subpoint. And so what Geshe explained is this, that when we look at the example of a chariot is a whole. When we talk about a whole, it consists of parts, right? When the parts are put together, that will create what the whole is. So chariot itself is the whole, or the part possessor, for lack of eloquent English word. And the wheels and the axle and the spokes and all of these things are the parts of the chariot, right? These are what, how should I say, part possessor, and this is the parts possessed by the chariot. So in other words, the key point here is that there is no such thing as intrinsically existent chariot, because chariot is dependently existent. Yeah? That for the chariot to exist, it must depend upon its parts, like all of its parts, the wheel, the rim, all of that. And for its parts to exist, as part of a chariot, they are also dependent upon the chariot. So there is that mutual dependence upon the whole and the part are mutually dependent upon each other, right? If a part is missing, then there is no complete whole. Yeah? And so what that tells us, that mutual dependence upon each other, as a matter of fact, when all the parts are put together and that looks like a chariot, that's labeled as a chariot. Yeah? So that shows that a chariot does not exist intrinsically or essentially. So that's the example, right? Now we use the example to connect to the real meaning, which is the self of a person. We, the self or the person, also exist dependently, and person or the self is the whole, like the chariot. Okay? And the different parts of the self, such as our aggregates. We have 5 psychosomatic aggregates. Okay? We have what we sometimes call it the 18 constituents, or the what called the sensory sources, like 6 of them, and consciousness is dependent upon them. So all of these things constitute what a self or person is. These are the parts of self or person. So person or self is the whole, or the part possessor, yeah? And the parts that it possesses or it has are all the different parts of the body: eyes, ears, nose, all the aggregates. Yeah? So a person is very much dependent upon its aggregates, sources, all other things, and all of its parts are dependent upon the person. Yeah? So that mutual dependence upon each other suggests or illustrates that person or self does not exist in and of itself or intrinsically. So it is empty of intrinsic reality.
근데 신다다 되건 좀 다들 거는 이제 신다 다 배디 세자리 에너지 연화 직타돼서 매번 예산 배디 예산이 그래서 내 신다도 되거나 저 나버 뭐 강대양 니버 민주위스 신다 니니 신다데 에너 연화도 직타돼가 많이 나신게 다다디 통담주베 리베제베나 이야요 말이스 이야면은 런시 중세제메 이제 마제부 군소도요도 세자 데 추간가 비고 또베다 좀 마제 마다 마제베 요르 말이지 그 딱동세 유이된 파세가 신의 요 말이스 로커런스 차라디 다가랑기 이 샤 다가랑 딘파 만도 셰니 어디 샤야리스 와리다 주바.
So to substantiate that point, we have a quote from great Indian master Arya Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, which you find in the middle of page 307. And so as Geshe explained, that when we look at our example, a chariot which is whole and has parts, and we analyze it in 7 those different ways, because we did that analysis before, we couldn't find a chariot that is intrinsically existent. But not finding an intrinsically existent chariot does not mean a chariot does not exist at all, because it does exist, right? It serves its purpose, it functions. And so our analysis involves, if, hypothetically speaking, there is such thing as an intrinsically existent chariot, it could only exist in 2 possible ways. There's no third option, right? It's plan A or plan B. There's no plan C here, right? Does it exist as intrinsically, identical with its parts, right? It does not. Okay? Does it exist as intrinsically as being different or distinctive from its parts? It does not. So when we analyze the, what is supposedly intrinsically existent chariot, we couldn't find it exist in any of these ways. So the conclusion is that there is no intrinsically existent chariot. The conclusion is not there is no chariot. That's the wrong conclusion. The conclusion is that there is no intrinsically existent chariot. However, in the absence of that intrinsic reality, a chariot exists dependently and it functions as a chariot serves its purpose. In the same way, now we apply it to self or a person. A person is simply or merely imputed onto collection of psychosomatic aggregates of a person. There is no person that is intrinsically existent. And how can we say that there isn't one? Is if there were to be, hypothetically speaking, right, then we do the ultimate analysis. So in the analysis, we say, if there is intrinsically existent person, does it exist as being one with, identical with aggregates? We couldn't find it. Does it exist as intrinsically as being separate and distinctive from the aggregates? We couldn't find it. So that unfindability suggests or clearly indicates that there is no intrinsically existent self or a person. But the person does exist. Conventionally, person exists. Because person exists just the way the worldly people accept, we talk about, right? Hey, I'm fine, I'm not fine. When the worldly people, we the people talk about, we don't put everything under scrutiny and analysis. We just talk in a very conventional, nominal way, right? I exist, you exist, that. Right? So we don't do ultimate analysis to talk about how things do exist. So things do exist conventionally, just the way to talk about, and they exist for our deceptive mind, isn't it? Okay? They do not exist for the mind that does ultimate analysis. When things don't exist for the mind that does ultimate analysis, that conclusion is not that things don't exist at all, because that's got the wrong conclusion. What that means is things do not exist the way we always thought they exist intrinsically. Okay.
Nyeshe da ge wa rashi dan gewa mami rashi kan gayang mami pa na kowa le chowa jode di sheba juros tadi ti tongza de korwa rada nga nor do ade ida nga jasha de rare re gide kanji desi war da usin ta namdi sheba de chiyo de san nga rashi ma pe ma do che ede nga ye me na wa se de nga yi wa te kai ke sa mi se she ma ro ta ti mi se she ma re da di rashi be do so no ene nga ye me na nga la pa se de ga ra yi ma do ju ku re ri pa tel de do to re se wa ta ka ji
알렌 남주 우마데 데날 게 나랑 심야마도 가이바랑 심합시다.
단 민도 아데 디단데 나디 직타데 카리세 마도 나이오 직타데 게 제바지야 도바서 어디서
So we are at the bottom of page 307, still on the same page, but under the caption that reads, teaching that what the self owns is also thereby established as lacking intrinsic existence. So to simplify it, what it means is that not only self or person does exist intrinsically, but everything else that the self or a person owns or uses, which is called mind, or I and mine, they don't exist intrinsically. Yeah? So in this text, when we look at that, the whole analysis is applied to whether or not self or a person, purusha, exists intrinsically, right? The analysis is not really applied to the mind part, right? What is owned by the self or the person. But what Geshe explains here is that the same analysis and reasoning is applicable not only to the self, but also to the mind, right? That we just mind. Everything, my body, my eyes, my beautiful nose, he didn't say that, but just, to wake you up, everything beautiful we like. So what is mine? My handsome body, he didn't say that. It doesn't exist intrinsically, just like the self. If the self does not and could not exist intrinsically, how could my beautiful body exist intrinsically, which is owned by the self, or which is, the part of the self? It could not. Okay? If we do the same analysis and use the same reasoning, we can understand that. So at the bottom of page 307, we find it stated, I quote, when yogis do not see any intrinsic existence in either the self or what the self owns, which is mind, then they are liberated from cyclic existence. How can we free ourselves from samsara, cyclic existence is? Only if we realize that both self and mind, they do not exist intrinsically. They are empty of intrinsic reality. If we only realize that, then that realization frees us or liberates us from samsara and its all the headaches,
타가는 코쉐브레세 디셰니 다디 콩으로 라지 저지 발레스 다니 여마이나 다게 여바 칼레 헤 주관레 강지 시오베지 레베바 제제 다게 다미 빠예미 제제 다다 동다신 가사 제제 다 동다신세 내저버도 넘버 쇼 저스 어디 콩디게 강지 에네 다라심이 또서네 이네 telate 다기와라심이 또로리스 이네 베는다 디샹을 베지 얘기를 되서월 다다 라르심 카도 요한의 지금 샴을 얘기를 디저로 베는 마샤 보면 또서는 이네 딜로디가 마샤 보면 또 그러면도 마샤 보면 나와다 라메와 무슨 또고 뭐지 신은 될 정지 치고 말이고 마샤 보면 또서도 콜 나와다 라메와 강은 예사래서 와 어떻게 와
So the main point that is conveyed here is that just as self or a person could not exist in and of itself or himself or herself, in the same way, what is regarded as mind right, owned or possessed by the self, also do not exist intrinsically in and of themselves. The reason why we talk about this is that oftentimes in this textbook, what we find is there's a whole lot of discussion analysis about how to understand and counteract grasping at the self of a person, isn't it? Because we have this innately developed. This is not more intellectual. It just comes with like that. Nobody need to be educated or uneducated here. It's just everybody has this natural, grasping at the intrinsic reality of a self. Okay? But once we understand that the self or person does not exist in that way, then it becomes easier for us to understand how mind, right, also lacks intrinsic reality. Mind means everything part of the self or owned by the self, right? My body, my eyes, my all of that, so to substantiate all that things, we have two quotes from authentic texts. One is Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise, Mule Madhyamika. At the bottom of page 307, I quote, "If the self does not exist, how could there be something owned by the self, right? That could exist intrinsically." On the back of the back page, or the page 308, we have a stanza quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on the Middle Way, and which reads, "Since objects do not exist without agents, what the self owns does not exist without the self. Therefore, yogis are liberated through seeing that the self and what it owns are empty," unquote, right? As Geshe explained it. So for us to be free from samsara, the key to that freedom or the liberation is to realize that both self or the person and mind, what is, do not exist intrinsically. So if we realize that, then we will be free from samsara. But once we understand that self doesn't exist intrinsically, we really don't have to explain in every detail how the mind does not exist, right, intrinsically. The example Geshe gave is like, once we know there is no son of a barren woman, right, then we really don't have to, but hey, son of the barren does not have a beautiful eyes and the ears and well, that doesn't exist. I mean, we really don't need to talk about, is his head big or small or nose small. We don't, because a son of a barren woman doesn't exist. So once we understand that self does not exist intrinsically, then we really don't need to discuss much about how, the body of the self or that part of the self doesn't exist intrinsically.
어디 해다다 랑심에 또비 투 다교 랑심에 또번 주로 도저지바 내가 제스뭐 해버셔서 당기해야 돼. 간지 마셔 보면 어떤 티라도 나와서 메버 도고 말이야. 또디 그런 로사인스다. 시사 틀때는 시리즈요.
So the concluding paragraph on page 308, basically states, as Geshe explained, that once we understand that person or the self or purusha or kamsa in Tibetan does not exist intrinsically, then we would also be able to understand that mind, right, everything that belongs to the self or the person, do not exist intrinsically either. It's just like once you know a barren woman cannot give birth to a child, then you really don't need to talk about the size of that child or the, all other things,
that's somebody reporting here, Jerry, that Pumbu Jeva Hindi Jeva Dang, Sumba Hindus, Pumba, Nabula Sova Namjang, Heber Shates, that did that the Dharmatic is in here, the Karzana, any Nanzin Jigda, any Nayos, the Kanzag, Dahida, Daksuni, Jeva Shema. So this or the get the Kajeva Marva. But didn't I consult think the Jeva the zone, any consult that Dagora you requatele any songs that have congot any requatimod any teletene Rahimoto or the teaching in Sota.
So the next page on number 1, the main outline reads, objects lack intrinsic nature. Okay? And so the major subpoint reads, how to apply those lines of reasoning to other phenomena. Okay? And so then the subpoint B reads how to determine that there is no self in phenomena and with subpoints. Okay. So the point here is, as Geshe explained, what we have already discussed so far is pretty much focused upon person or a self and mind, isn't it? A person whom we believe 100% exists objectively, intrinsically, essentially, whatever, right? Really, there is no such person, you know. But persons do exist, you know, and function. Yeah. So everything is kind of focused upon understanding the emptiness of intrinsic reality of self or a person, and everything belongs to the person, mind, isn't it? We really haven't talked about the emptiness of the table and the house and the rest of the phenomena, isn't it? So now the next chapter, what it says is that once we understand that self and mind do not exist intrinsically, we can do the ultimate analysis, we can do the lines of critical thinking and reasoning. The same analysis and the lines of reasonings could be imported and applied to the rest of the phenomena to understand that the table, the pillar, everything else also lacks intrinsic nature or the reality.
No, this is super reported on Channel. She does the Pumba Shigdal. Sheba said, Pumbala so now, Sola so now, the Chictadi, that is the Pumba and the Pumba Soja, Pumba Casa, Pumba Shabs, the Toa said, the day we are Chashi the Dash of Jorwa. So that the report is easy was a Chictadi, Pumba the cat, and the Kizzy Rashi Choyana, and the Chictadi, Jevatin, the Jevati, the Shusel, and Roto Wera. What is your number did on Tita the Yikanda. Many Maji Taji humor job in this Dinita, the Tontamba Yamaris, good the Unicorn Tontam did tell a Yachik had it saying in the Tazo in the good to Yomaris, Chita to go to the Yoroa.
No.
Or did it? Tazo say in Tontam the good of Hana Yomaris, Nia Yomarva. What is Karsa, human Karsa. Majib Tani, human job in the Papa Dombasum Tembales, Dodges, Jide not say, not Jide Midzete, Jidin Kanyavata. Never they were young, I did that, dead, she is some with them. Jide, it shall be repay, Mungo, he was, or did it. Tata, you said, Jide, in this Nagatu, the Geshe, the Chungju said, the Zebo, the Zebo Maris. Tagaran Dazato veteran Tarasha, Tilia to Marin Zevo Maris, Yaga Maris and Hill Vessel, that we still got the Tarasha. That Jide got a thing, you see, the Gilaro, that Jide got this and did it. Jide that Tonta was at, you didn't even think about Sigora. So the Jide got there doing, yep, you thought they cannot get there, Jordan Tarasha, we make it. Tio Marsi Messicora. That Jide did my repeated Jigdes and that data repeat Jebashing, Jide Ranga, and that Zogumara. That Jide Sebashing, the Entebbe, you didn't the year remain, and then Digmar said to her, not the Jigde Casa. And Jigde not the day, none Jigde the music, Jigde the Yoka day, now you were master song just there. Jide Tiny of you said the Constitution, you don't hear that, Jamare. No, what is that?
No. So we're on the next page, which is supposed to be 308, 9, on number page. So under the caption, how to apply those lines of reasoning to other phenomena. So once we really understand how to do the ultimate analysis and the analytical reasoning and apply that to self and mind and understand how they do not have intrinsic nature of reality, then we could use the same analysis and lines of reasoning to understand the lack of intrinsic reality of all other phenomena, including table and the pot and the pots and pans and the kitchen and the sink and all of that. Right? They didn't say that, but put the list there. And as Geshe explained, for example, when we think of a vase, right, the Tibetan Pumba, the vase, so now if we can apply the same analysis, does the vase, let's say this is a vase, imagine it, okay, it looks like a vase. Does the vase exist objectively and intrinsically just the way we thought that it does? Yeah. So we say, okay, if a vase were to exist intrinsically, that's how it would exist, then it should be findable out there, so to speak, isn't it? An intrinsically existent vase. But in reality, when we look at the vase has many parts. It's dependent upon its parts. It has the brim, right? It has this bulbous, belly thing, and it's holding the water. It has the stand, So all of this suggests that the vase has different parts and is very much dependent upon each of its parts. Now, when we analyze, if there is intrinsically existent vase, then it has to be findable either as being one with all these parts or as being different, right? Analysis is whether it is identical or it's different. Yeah? So we say, is this the part, the vase, right? Intrinsically, no. Yeah? Is that the part? Is that the part, right? We analyze, we couldn't find an intrinsically existent vase among its parts. Now we said, could the vase exist as being distinctively different from all of these parts? There isn't one. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is not that the vase does not exist, because it does. I'm drinking water from it. The conclusion is that it does not exist intrinsically as we always believed in it. So the same kind of analysis and line of reasoning could be applied to any other phenomena of our interest. So the main thing is that things do exist conventionally, just the way ordinary people accept it. Buddha said it very clearly at the bottom of page. That same page, 309, the quote is from the chapter teaching the three vows, right? And I quote, "The world debates with me," that Buddha says, the world is debating with me. I do not debate with the world. Okay? Whatever is held in the world to exist or not exist, I also hold as such. This is literally what it says. So Buddha said, I do not argue with the world. In the world, people talk about rich and the poor and the beautiful and the ugly and bold and the beautiful and all of that. He said, I said, except that. I'm not saying like rich and poor don't exist. I don't say beautiful and ugly don't exist. I said, just the way you said. So I'm not arguing with you, debating with you. But the world, you are arguing with me. Why? Because the world believes that things must exist essentially, objectively out there, as if everything has to be findable. Right? If things don't exist from its own side, how could they exist? It has to exist. It has to be there. I have to look for it, right? So this is where Buddha said, right? I'm telling you nothing exists out there, objective, intrinsically, and you have difficulty understanding it. So you are really arguing with me. I'm not arguing with you. When you say rich and poor, beautiful and ugly, big and small, short and tall, whatever, I accept them just the way you said it. So the point here is that the things do exist conventionally for the conventional consciousness, isn't it? Things do not exist for the mind that does ultimate analysis. So in reality, there is no such thing as intrinsically existent, even conventionally, or ultimately. Intrinsic reality does not exist in terms of the true truths, right? In terms of ultimate truth, there is no intrinsic reality. In terms of conventional truth, some with this idea, there is no intrinsic reality. So intrinsic reality does not exist at all, period, right? It doesn't exist ultimately or as an ultimate reality. It doesn't exist conventionally as a conventional reality. It is zippo, non-existent, completely,
Pumba number in the mouth, no, the show was the top, Pumba, numbers and then peg that I have numbers. Renta said it, condition, Mars, I think, was a Marjas, a Mamatera, that not sitting out, King was don't have to say, Jung I say, can't use the medias at the say. The thing that tends and the thing that chong is your changes here to get it right. And then drone is in that day. Mit heda neza yase so siwa drone la one khanda tang sta de ni khanje ta chhe thamje Rigwati Jagordi, that should have in the museum. Shedata, Jidder, Yonraga, and Povana was a big time I didn't know.
No.
What the Zaga say, what I
No.
take contact on a Jenny, never done a torch at this, or that taking the church in and Jidin to the end, there is a Tarana. Current love and the meaning of the race love and the love and the Tarana dog race me in the Tazon say yo, my race or that.
No, so.
Consider Thomas and Jidin is a say any pen this or that joke that is young Radawa. That's not this also Maris Sumara. But this is what I show you tell you. Tara Jidil Carla call your daisies or Sanjay called daisies. Jidil Yonra carry the Tara Shah, Tim Maris like Maris.
No. So we are on page 310. Right on the top, we have a quote from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way. And so it provides a number of examples of phenomena, such as a small chariot, pot, cloth, tent, army, forest, rosary, tree, guest house, and so on. Okay. Of course, we won't be able to analyze each and every phenomenon because they're just, countless. But these are some of the examples that ordinary people, often talk about, right? The pot and the cloth and the tent and all of those things. And we can use any of these examples from our everyday life and do the same analysis and use the same lines of reasoning. We can understand that nothing, exists intrinsically. Okay? So as Buddha said, I do not argue with the world, but the world argues with me, because I accept the way world talks about, right? If somebody says, you know what, this is pen, Buddha is not going to like that. What do you mean it's a pen? Which one? The top one, the bottom one, the inside one, the outside? What do you mean? I mean, nobody's going to put the ultimate analysis. This is a pen? Okay, that's a pen. Okay? Well, here's a monk. Well, there's a monk. We are not like, really? Which one is the monk? Nobody does ultimate analysis. It's just accepted as it is, right? Rich, poor, pot, pen, whatever, just the way it is, Buddha said. So I don't agree with that. I'm not going to say, okay, what do you mean pen? Which one is the pen? The tip one, the bottom one, right? Nobody does that. It's conventionally as it is accepted. That's like it's just if somebody says that's table, nobody's going to argue with it, right? Buddha's not going to like, no, you're goof. That's not a table. Where's the table? He's not going to say that. That's a table. But what is that we should not apply the ultimate analysis to every phenomenon, just accept the way conventionally people talk about, right? You're not going to say like, who are you? I mean, really, who? Who are you? I'm not going to do that, Just, I'm Tenzin, okay, accept it. If my name is a Buddha, don't say, are you really Buddha? You're not a Buddha, you're deluded. No, I'm just called Buddha, so that's my name, And Buddha's not going to fight with that, In Tibetan, it's called Sangye. That's why I said Buddha. Probably in English, nobody's called Buddha, but except the Buddha himself.
Yana yunde deja senyi tane sekarsa. Tane pekin la so tang yunde jen yana la je cha de senyi mela so o ton ta mela so de da tenum xingde namji xewe namba de ji yumen xing tele xing di chewe se jedi trabe go ne yaba yins. This is that in Congo di Kanje, that in the Pumbatan Ganga, in the Tagon says in the Yamaris. So that they must say it again, made the Pukin, in the Yonden, Yonden Seado, in the Yala, the Yala Jensad, Chakji and the Chakm Seado, or did that Yama, those tunes, Tagon say in the Yamaris. Tell Jidi, Mata, Masev, any Jidin Chavan and Shinji, any Yoris.
So in the middle of page 310, it continues to describe that examples such as pot or a vase. If you look at every of its parts, it's very much dependently existent, and nothing is intrinsic about any of its parts. So therefore, a vase or a pot does not exist intrinsically. So when we talk about the conventional reality, it is accepted just the way conventionally people talk about, okay? And Buddha is not going to argue about that. So whatever it is called, rich, poor, pen, quick, ugly, beautiful, whatever, that's it. But do not apply the ultimate analysis, say, what do you mean beautiful? We cannot, we cannot look to find what is imputed onto things. It's simply labeled as whatever it is, but don't try to look for what is that. That becomes unfindable. That unfindability does not mean that thing does not exist at all. It simply means it does not exist intrinsically, essentially, objectively, and whatever other words we have, that way.
Tela kang gon hes tela kang gon jiu ji din ba di ye ba ten nam jiang ma da ba ye ba kho na da ba she de tian kang shen na yin la jiang de so ba de da ni pu ba le song na se da de ma je ren bu shi se xie jiong ge是吧da pu ba le song wei na pu ba ne yin la jiang da ene yuan de jian xie ko le yuan de ye ba ka do de ye de ka do ye ze yuan de ye ba ene ka sa 연아见的永定见的那诚信了是碰不得诚信写的他全部了是为연아的是全部了是为的这边着碰不所有子人是呢下的子人那时候我不了说吧永定是的看到是永定因是我说他到的话去求我的这边人我说你诚信了是都是去的关键我就看这是呢那都是去的的话是的普遍诚信的人是Nambu la so la ya taking jaro sa. That is that Pumaka thing that number city Kades is a country peg ta have the two of the number zero. But then you can get
So we're still in the middle of page 310, and of course now Jerumbuchi, the author of this Lamrim Chemu, is kind of explaining it more. Looking at the example of a vase or a pumba, translated as pot here. Pot is a whole, it has its parts. So whole and the parts are very much dependent upon each other. But we can also say that pot has certain characteristics that defines what pot is. Okay? Again, in English it doesn't come off eloquently, but who cares? Because in Tibetan it's like, it's so beautiful, it looks very profound. Right? Once we translate English, it's like, what? It is a bulbous pot? What does that mean? Anyway, so every phenomenon has its own defining characteristics. So that defining characteristics really constitute what the phenomenon is. So that shows the dependent reality very much so. And the pot is qualified. I know, even in English, I think, what is qualified? It's talking about the pot has qualities, which means it's not intrinsically existent, right? If something intrinsically existent, it could not have many qualities, right? The pot is beautiful, it is very artistic and creative, whatever design, and all these are qualities of the pot, So among its characteristics, among its qualities, when we try to look for what pot is, we could not find intrinsically existent pot. But nonetheless, pot does exist conventionally, and it functions, right? It serves certain, function. Now the same is with any other phenomena. The cloth. It says cloth here, but the Tibetan word nambu is a woolen cloth, right? So woolen cloth means it is made out of wools, right? You make the thread out of the wood and everything. That's So it is not intrinsically existent, wool and the woolen thread, and then weavers, and So it's not intrinsically existent either.
So that is no that Jato the jokes they said it and it's Yana said and the Kamba said didn't don't as a part of Kavan said the draw yard is going to did it so sure that Yana maybe share over. What did you tell you? Yana the Yana anything study said anything got over did
So as we can apply the same analysis to any phenomenon like the table, right? The table has different parts, right? There's the flat part on the top part, then there's the legs, and then whatever the design, the front and the back and whatever, right? So that shows that table is very much a dependent existence or reality. There is no intrinsically existent table, right? If we try to look within all of its parts, we couldn't find it.
Karsa deja nesa da deja says deja ne lagbar heba tang chagwa ne di tenjin de ti me da the Tenjin citizen insero. The just said, like what Hembata. That you Hembat Chakin to say at insero. The Chakwane tea dende zero. Tea density on the Jack dende was it. That swimming is sorry. Tombo Chakwa Chunjun she. Tinik and the Jack shook share negative and it was the Jack. The Jack Chakbasi. When you shook you negative mother here, the Jigwara, the Jaran she. Did it on the Jan like what Hembata. Shook Shemur she. Chakwane tea dende citizen. That the deja then that you to go or this was it.
No, so.
The Chaljan Kansala in Jabber the head was there. The Chaljan Kansala and Jabber head was Chakba said it in here. The Chaljan Kansala and Jabber head was it is on Omanju around in here. This colors the Chaljan Kansala in the Siwa.
So we're still on page 310, more towards the bottom, where there's mentioned reference to attachment, or deja, and chakshin. Deja can be translated attachment, and the chakshin is more like the obsessive attachment or that clinginess, like clinginess, you know. There's a little bit difference in the sense that because of what we call chimi yije, which we translated as inappropriate mental application. Now, I don't know what idea you get out of that. Then attachment arises in us, you know. So attachment can have many different degrees, right? It can be just a small one, right? But then it picks up its intensity in that one, you know. And then it's like that one. So that becomes really clinginess, right? That's what we call shemba. It's not just you're attached. Now you're obsessively attached, right? You're stalking someone. I mean, he didn't say that. Takin deja the digedi ka rangshi yo mars la wo re.
La, this was the deja said the winning deja zero. Sakwa Shema je. Chakwa said the deja como was it. Come deja guess a hit. Then of tells you that then the Karikas and Chakshin Kasa Shadow. The Chakshin Kasa and deja jigro. Deja Mingis the Jimara.
In the Tati Rangshima to Geshe again.
La.
Then deja de shark or the deja de Rangshima.
You get shadows on the jar that didn't my reward you to the change it was sure causes so no jet with the red Shiva or this one.
So basically, I mean, we are again saying that afflictive emotions such as attachment or clinginess also lack intrinsic nature, right? Because I mean, attachment exists in the minds of those who are attached to whatever, isn't it? It exists in a person. The person, you know, it has to exist in a being. You know, attachment doesn't exist in the cyberspace. You know, it exists in a being, whether a human being or a being, right? So we are attached to all kinds of things, and that attachment also arises in relation to its object, something that is attractive, seemingly, right? So that what this shows is that it doesn't exist intrinsically because it arises in relation to, independence upon, not independence, independence upon, you know, its object. So therefore, it lacks intrinsic reality.
Oh, the men 60 and the Putin is 60. Tell a Yala, then Yala, Gendola, Yala, Jen, then young Yala, Dobin, Mels la, the Putin, then the Medobi. Jaros, that country, you're not in that Chajan, the Shaki, Mingasi Yomaro, but he required that Dekorangi machine and Shuganga Tijaya is yours.
So basically, the point, whether we look at this example, that example, is that we can pick and choose any phenomenon, and it definitely will have different parts, you know. And so when anything has a part, so it naturally is a dependently existent because it depends upon the whole, depends upon the part depends upon the whole, and the same with whether it's a pot or pan or fire or whatever. Now here the next example is fire and fuel, all right? The fire burns the fuel, so the fire and fuel again exist dependently, you know. Even the way we label it, right? Fuel to the fire, right? So that shows that fire and fuel lack intrinsic nature.
Oh, the Rabji Jebale, so Jebali, Rabji Ali Jebale Lego. 15年了电线性，连夜15天，电热嘛到不，随便用的嘛到写到，15我到连到给，我不那么写不上，写生别是建设机器的热不到，大家的车嘛的写着了时候，他们这我也就没出去，平时对是出发怎么的这写不上我是我他妈。刚刚认真的，当时在变得在15年了，现在变得，这个在那变得轻松而已呢。那轻松是轻松些，这个轻松在轻松是我说。那这轻的过轻松的啥样子，练是个练个的，我这轻的轻松些，轻松开始按照，那我开始练到15以了，电的上嘛，就平时。练了的小波大，小波的练啥是吧？小波轻松些，练的轻的了，所以轻的是吧？我这在过轻不是可轻松那个嘛是吧？我的说是轻松这个轻松那个是吧？我的这些，但这个呢，轻可能搞都看了讲那我的我的个还不会改变对吧？我电熊啊什么的，这买吧就有可能电突然这样嘛，这是我的。
At the bottom of page 310, we have quotes from Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise, where it reads, I quote, agents arise in dependence upon objects, and objects arise in dependence upon those very agents. Apart from this, we see no way for agents and objects to exist. And all other things should be understood by way of what I explained about agents and objects. So the example Geshe has given is that if we think in terms of a carpenter, right? Somebody, who works with carpentry as a profession, right? So based upon his or her profession, somebody is called carpenter, right? He's not called blacksmith because carpenter does not draw, that profession. So that shows that a carpenter is an agent, who produces, furnitures or whatever, work he or she is doing. And those objects, the profession and objects, they are very much dependent upon each other. So there is no such thing as intrinsically existent carpenter or carpentry or profession for that matter.
我这个题他考虑刚刚来，我不刚刚来家学生的话，平时这边吃饭这写不上我说，但是当初在那满意章。他原来要是我什么的要是没来要嘛是吧？我这要是他呢，当初在里面那没的是呢，要的是，没到不要的是，他等到这不足够是吧
？So try to kind of bring home the main point. What we're saying is that everything is merely labeled by terms and concepts. So everything is merely labeled reality, right? But we must not try to find the imputed phenomenon because it's unfindable. That unfindability does not mean phenomena do not exist at all, because phenomena do exist. They exist conventionally, and when we don't do analysis, right, they exist for the conventional mind or the consciousness. Yeah? And that's how realities are. Okay.
我这当那大的不进了，其他这个让信息，东巴的让信没把消息特别是电影有的些呢，的确他们这了，前呢他们这一让信没把得了都到我那边，那些被别动人了是也把他不小我啥，我那多着不定的，他当然这提示是吧？现在这当时。大的不进了是大的不进来，你这把些年呢，让些当么严重呢？大的让些没得下些大白得都用了，现在睡的要不先说那时候了。你提这个把的学他们这把家呢，学他年了得了都到不住这些，现在说咱你别多年了，也把掏不少我是，你也把掏是的咱他不现在白些是吧？你现在白的看啥家？你现代人了，这家的没有那现代人因为那些的那些那看啥的家呢？我听了他那现在白热些啊，咱们头嘛这个嘛的时候是吧？这了样的样的空的，大让热下是个这边一般就学过这时候。
We're on top of page 311, the second paragraph. According to Geshe's explanation, if we, how should I say, we really understand how the example of a chariot, functions exist, and applying that to the self or a person, we understand, then we will be able to understand how all other phenomena also lacks intrinsic reality. So when we say really understand, I don't know how much sense I can convey in English. What means through valid cognition experiences, we have to ascertain it. It's not like intellectually, I know what the chariot, I'm kind of playing with it. It's a 70, I can't do that. Okay, person that, not that much, That's a little bit like intellectually kind of savvy thing, not that. But we really have to understand, right, the whole concept inside out, outside in, whatever you want to say, right? And then really understand by our valid experiences, then we can apply it to any other phenomena. We will be able to understand how things lack intrinsic reality. Okay? So for that kind of a valid understanding or the valid, how should I say, certainty, we have to, how should I say, develop more and more familiarity and intimacy with ultimate analysis and the lines of reasoning. So when we apply it over and again, we think about over and again, then we will be able to develop that definitive understanding. Okay, maybe that's a better word. Okay, of the example and emptiness of the self.
지기전에 탐지동 신이 뭔부 희시장 될라 지바죠 제송보다로 근데 되다 지기다고 되고 있다고 해서 근데 동이던 최지 동이던 아니 현다 리그도 소소소나 다로 그래서 지기다고 해야 되지 어디야 분배동이던 가요 동이던 책을 들라고 말아 신나 어디 로스 로버 그런 거는 상관없던 된 또로 그래서 어디 또 그래서 그래서 제 소마다로 제다다디 단다 신다다 인다 아니 되게 세계시 인디 세계시도 야보하고서 인 최현대 저게 세계시도 요 말아 그때 리코드 거는 피네 인도
So we are still on page 311. On the top, there is a quote from King of Concentration Sutra, which reads, "As for your perception of the self, extend that sort of understanding to everything. The essence of all phenomena is pure, like the sky. You can know them all by way of one. You can see them all by way of one. No matter how many things you can explain, do not be arrogant about it." Unquote. So Geshe's explanation here is like elsewhere also is stated, my footnote. I think it's in the Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It says, if you see the ultimate reality of one phenomenon, you would be able to see the ultimate reality of all other phenomena. Which means that if we understand the emptiness of intrinsic reality of a single phenomenon, whatever that is, X, Y, Z, then it's a matter of shifting our focus onto other phenomena. By the power of that understanding of the realization, we can also easily understand the emptiness of all other phenomena. Otherwise, it becomes like an endless work. If we have to work with every phenomenon, right? When does that end? You just can't. So emptiness is the same for every phenomenon. Once we realize the emptiness of one phenomenon, right? It's a matter of focusing our mind on the other, and by the power of that reasoning and analysis, we can understand, right? The emptiness of the other. For example, let's say you have realized the emptiness of a pot. Okay. At that moment, we can't say that you have realized the emptiness of the pillar. But if you simply focus your mind on the pillar, you can easily understand the emptiness of the pillar. You don't have to make any extra effort, isn't it? Because emptiness is one, right? Understanding one, you can understand many, kind of thing. So we will stop there today, and we welcome your questions. Geshe say page 311. Okay. Volume number 3, page 311. Okay, sure.
Okay. So here, something threw me off. It said, when yogis do not see any intrinsic existence in either of the self or
Yes.
blah blah blah,
Mhm.
they'll be liberated from cyclic existence.
Yes.
So cyclic existence is supposed to be like samsara, right?
Mhm.
Correct. So far, okay.
Mhm.
How is it that in seeing the emptiness thing,
Mhm.
you're freed from samsara? Because
Mhm.
like when, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
the enlightened people have been on Earth. They're enlightened here on Earth, so they
Mhm.
have to continue living by the rules of Earth.
Yes.
So I guess my question and my confusion is, what exactly is samsara?
And free from
Where?
samsara.
No, not free.
Mhm.
What exactly is samsara?
Mhm.
Where is it actually? Because
Okay.
it can't be the world.
Okay.
Because and then what's it made out of?
Okay, sure. Okay, I got it. Quran ki condition di dire ta tagi deli ya ninjo bagi ane ta ta tagi bagi rowagen and teme to wa ina en ko wale chugres la rowagen so that di korwa says your rowagen di ngwenjin chetan di rowagen kawaris yores kowa de rowa chor sin rowagen and kowa di ji jala rob jin gyubja kare söse yores rowagen kowa de tela rowagen pena zambuling de cha sha di nalia da ji gi ngune thane ji tongni to de gyuta mo mangbu yi rowagen so di kowa rebe mares rowagen sene ane tongni to ba yina di gi kowa de kande straight sala rowagen o dige di deshi chona na so rowa kowa sene kare res rowagen kowa de kawa yores rowa kowa de gyubja kare sö yores ane tongni to san kowa le chöla di kande straight go res rowagen 한 자불린 디가 끼우다 뭐 망보여래. 건서 코에나 취되어래. 수고서 와다.
코로나세데 테스고 다지금 들어 레데 니모 안게 애니 인저 자베 샤세야죠. 디다 샤세야레 말라나 애니 레데 니모 안게 야양 풍부베게 돌렌신 문데베 꼬라코니 애니 동에 뭐 냐동게 고티 히도데 델다 풍부가데 현디게 코아시그레스 다 그래 하시도 풍부래요 그러봐 어디에서도 코아 코르시 그래스
맞아. 디 잠불린 거 사자들 코바를 쓰고 말.
사자디 코아리스 그 사자디 코아시야디 강사 이게 되어 뭐서 봐 쳐도 시작 말이
그래서
다 코레 니아레스 내려와 코아 이름 코아리 주이도 차고
아노. 아 코바를 줘서는데 단다 레더 녀멍 치마를 줘 마다 네들 줘베기 저시고 말.
어떤 네디 코스타 룽바도 코아 말이
디스코 말로스.
동네 대바대로 와디 코아 말이
First, Geshe, I want to explain what samsara or cyclic existence means. You know, when you said where is it or what it's made out of, kind of thing, right? Of course, the technical definition is a little hard to put in English, but to give a sense of what it is defined as being in a bondage due to contaminated karmic actions and afflictive emotions. Okay? And so what it means is because of contaminated karmic actions, afflictive emotions, that we end up taking rebirth over and again and having to abandon our body in aggregates. You know, so that's roughly what the samsara is. So the environment where we live, it is not called samsara. So when we say be free from samsara, doesn't mean we will get out of this world or. So there could be a lot of enlightened beings here because it doesn't mean they're in samsara. The place is not called samsara. Samsara is associated with one's mind stream. So it is very much these aggregates we have, psychosomatic aggregates, which are called contaminated aggregates because these are the outcomes of contaminated karmic actions, afflictive emotions. So because of these aggregates, we suffer, right? Pain. So when we're free from samsara means, we will be free from that kind of a suffering and pain, that kind of a bondage. That's what it means. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
So realizing emptiness while you're still in this world, that would prevent you from needing to eat, sleep, keep warm, and tend to yourself?
Okay. that can say Tony Tob and I can call it Tars Lavage.
Ngade.
So the Zambaling Tagakal then Tony Tob, one the Tana Ravage.
Ngade.
Tony Toss on anything on the Drojan you do change your Ravage, Satung near one. The Kanga guard or a date on the Chetu or a carres or that one.
Kasayatmala.
Tony Tobina, Drojan you do to get the Kangalota, guard or and a Sayu or another color than the Sagur again. The Mutin in New York Caris or so.
Didn't move in there. Dameto Kalatas. Dameto and Kala Savis. This was just that the coil got things. She had a pretty pendo. That Chaya. What do? She had that. So so there in the answer that Koa said the big Dunga Mombo Mindu Mombo Yondo Goya did Tondo hero my Dunga Nazo Yondo Pumbanga tell them Yongora. The Pumbanga in the later Yimomo can the less sang it. The lay because I need Dunga Yondi or
No.
that Damet also.
No.
In the new mood, the Mayor Deja Consul said, Mary, Dame combustion is that.
No.
Commercial in Damet, that Tambogo Tower, the Mayor Rimarva. Come says any Danzi Mayorison, Danzi gave Numo Ganga Yomar, Numo Mena, in less and Dunga Pumbolia Yomarwa, in the Deval Bashimo, Dunga Shagarwa, or Tisharis, the core said the Director Kaze, Dungan not Yonsa hit the till Pumbunga till shot. On that thing, leg getting the Lindy and Japanga said, and Mega the Ganga Pop, Mayor Yavaganga suit job name. Kanji Dungan Yomogo, the one Bashi Tabato Sigora. Joata, till ya Gyeltsen, seems to turn you to the San Yokomoto say, that in my Rimba Mamboshi. Tonda Kani San led the Numuko on the Domogo. So the Ramon Topsana, Tabato, Takaji. Gonzata Beganga, Nikibo go, the Dugosi do Mari, the Ogo Dungusi do Marti, Ganga big Sozo has a Jeremora, Nama do Na, Shima she. What a Geshe for the Russians and a Bongo race, Gagati Carter. What did you know? What did it?
Geshe really like your question, and so Geshe says, yeah, if we realize emptiness of intrinsic reality, we will still be eating and functioning as we do, right? It doesn't stop us from eating and sleeping and walking and all of that, you know. Just kind of what samsara, if we want to point at something, like, okay, where is it, what is it, then we can roughly point it to our contaminated psychosomatic aggregates, the skandhas, right? Because this is the basis of all the suffering. Because of this, why? Because these aggregates we have are the outcomes of afflictive emotions and contaminated karmic actions, right? Because we have the deep down grasping at self, and that gives rise to all our afflictive emotions. And under the influence, we create a lot of negative karmas and contaminated karmas, and this produces this kind of outcome result. So long as we have these aggregates, there are so many ups and downs in our life. Things we really want usually don't happen, right? We want lasting happiness. Well, that's not here. We don't want any kind of pain and suffering, but we are ending up getting a lot of that, what we don't want. So why is that? We are not getting what we really want, we deserve, but we are getting all the things we think we don't deserve. Why is that? It's because of these aggregates, which are a bondage due to contaminated karmic actions and delusions. But once we realize emptiness, just simply realizing emptiness doesn't free us right away from the delusions. We have to cultivate more familiarity, intimacy with the realization. But once we do that, it uproots all the delusions from within our mind, afflictive emotions. So when the delusions stop, we are no more under their influence, and we do create karmas. Now our karmas are of different kind. It's positive karmas. So the positive karmas bring positive outcomes. So this is how we can put an end to samsara, and we can have the better outcomes, because of this kind of aggregates, we said, right now we really don't have a freedom over ourselves as much as we want to be, right? I want to have nothing but happiness. Well, I don't get it. I don't really deserve any kind of suffering. I get it. Rich become poor, poor become rich, and nobody wants to get sick. We get sick. Nobody wants to die. We will die one day. Why all of this is happening is because of, right, in that bondage called samsara, these aggregates, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
First of all, I want a clarification about this Alan's question about the Geshe said that this world is not samsara,
Right.
but the world we perceive is part of the form aggregate, and and it was said that all the our aggregates are contaminated, and whatever is a contaminated aggregates is samsara. So that seems to contradict what he's saying, that the world we perceive is not samsara.
Okay. Okay. Korang this what tanda nga joi king di ne di korwe ne rama di cover mares la bro. So korang sre nam ju nga ju gi ta ben ne di nga ju ta di ka la ta ka ta nyumo ga shi ta go ro ge. So nga ju nyumo gi kyön jeng ta ben ne di an korwe cha she mar wes. Cover che shi ne chö go go mar wes ro ba. So di da ge du go do ro nga ju nam ju cover sre ka la sa gung di che ro ba. Di da de gi nganzo 가서 다 nyumo wang ta be gi ta ne se ge ro ba ge. De ya ta ka su gu phung bo cha she la ro. Chlo di cha du go ro ba sa ge. Di de she she.
Ale de mo de ta de se ro de dang de se ya de da. ro da dang de se ya sin da ne yi de sha sho ro ba. De ko se de ma da yu dun da o de de bu sha go mo. Ka se na ko ra mo bo ja ya ge za she ge do wa. 네 지금 거라 뭐 자요 말아. 지금인데 다다 저들 근데 또 산 지금 해봐 차걸 마도 아무디 지 영자에서 뉴스는 용가요 말아. 코아세도 코아 모두 봐도 그 뉴스는 저거도 와. 이제 내가 뭔데 당대에 있는 레스. 저와는
다 당대에 미게 밴드 다대 샤더로게. 이 코베 차시 책 말로게. 당대.
코에 차시 다 심지지도에서는 코에 차시에서는 되게 자기에서는 되고 코아도 말이 코에 차시에서 심지 내사들이 되어와.
알레노스노서. 알레 코베 차시 있는 코버 말했어.
코 말이.
알레.
코 유이도 면서 하셔만.
알레노스.
감사하셔.
So it's kind of interesting. I think it's now we get into the technicality of things where Geshe thinks that, for example, the environment where we live in, we said that is an environmental result of our karma, which is negativity, whatever, right? But still, that environment we live in is not considered as a samsara. It is a result of our karma, which we could say, I don't know whether it works in English. It's not samsara, it's a part of samsara. Does it make sense in English? No, right? I think that's, yeah. So we said it is a part of samsara because it's an environmental result of our karma, diluted. But it is not a samsara. Samsara has to be in the nature of cyclical, right? Over and again, we go through that, go around and merry-go-round in samsara, isn't it? But the places where this world, if this is destroyed, there has to be another world. This world itself cannot come back again, So it is not, in that sense, it's not cyclical part of that. Okay.
But we're talking about individual samsara. This world is perception. I'm the
yes,
person.
It's a collective karma, right?
No, it's not collective really. These are my own yeah, it may be a result of collective karma, but we don't know about that. What we know is that what I perceive is my samsara. So from that point of view, it is samsara. Right. Samsara is individual. Everybody has their own samsara. There is no collective samsara.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So in that sense, everything I perceive, Alan perceives, or anybody else, the whole world that we perceive individually is samsara.
the chidun ke ma shebe jero wage mi ker so gi ta ji nyongzo da karen ti khora ker so ko cha de yor wa so wage ko nyomo da dinde wang yu so ta na thong jo kare men mi ker so ta na thong dam de yung ro wage so ko cha de re sa mi shang ba ko cha yen me ne ro wage ti cha de yo ma re so wage
me de so ko yin na de ge ne phung phung ga de re se mu da
phung phung ga da ta na ke di yu de ge so da ne da de ge so ba na ji le da kare wang gi ko ta jo jo ko cha de yo ma re so mi so
de chang ma se de dang de this karasanda ko dangre se asa leg sangye she ne en so the ka lungba khwa de ne ka ye lungba ji bo de ka ye lungba du ja pe me se tong do ka ka shi bu ka lungba ka bo ji ti ga dangre he mo en de te chang ma re karsa
ar so je ge dangre ma de ji ko ba chang ma
ko se de ji me ji khasa gyu de mo ji ma
I think the definition of the samsara, it has like that which is conjoined with your the mental consciousness, So as you said, I mean, as individual, whatever karma, something, we might perceive different places in some way. There may be part of samsara, but we don't regard it as samsara. It's something external to you. Okay? Yeah.
The dangre, dangre, ngango mige chibu ge, the mige achu the dangre to she the so the shadow. She the 제 가게를 자주도 음악감볼 지에서 가게를 동도 들으려고 모르세요. 근데 가게를 소설이 매 현다 이제 짜는 매 현직식으로 거기 레레를 낙제미라 하셔도 와. 우리 당대 셔.
So, I mean, the environmental result we call Dangda in Tibetan of karmas could be very individual thing, that, how should I say, we could be in the same country, but then we are in different parts of the country where we have different experiences, right? Sometimes you are in a better part of, that country, sometimes you are in the more problematic part of that, So it's related to your karma, definitely, but that is something external to you. We do not consider that as a samsara. Samsara has to be something conjoined with your, mind's. Any other thoughts?
I have actually
sure. Go ahead.
question. But the essentialists, the essentialists say that things must exist intrinsically if they're to function. Now, my question is, why do they say that? For example, is it because if we substitute intrinsically for objectively for intrinsically, that they say that things have to exist objectively if they function in order to function, because then there will be intersubjective agreement. I see something and somebody else sees something. So that means that this something exists objectively, which is synonymous with intrinsic. Is this why they're saying it?
Okay.
Or in another sense, even myself, I see something and then I can touch that something. So there is an agreement between two senses, two different senses.
Penang ngege chik thonggo ro wage gansa shamba je tebe ko chik thoye je de yor wa ta cha tyumo yene da mene de ro wage se de pige chik yo ko gu de ro wa pige di kore ngene mena ko ani chaje the shin sa ma de sa je ro wage pena pige chen chik duwa genge la ba chan de tu gu wa sla je ro wa ko ni de chik tho ne ko zo 가서 다 chue tam je yu rangwen du ku se di nang ga de cha de na sa ge.
So if I may, basically what they're saying is that things are not a product of an afflicted conscious, afflicted consciousness. They really exist objectively. That's
why. So yu korean when there ba ge nge gi yu jin nyomo ba yu jin de mo ga tan there ba yu korean when chi yu ar speak yu ro ba ge yu ba de 통고 ro ba nge ge 통고 mi shang ba 통고 la ba chang sho go tu sho go ro ba ge ko yu ku ku de speak rang when ro ba pige mena ko cha che thik min de la ba nenga de tu de go ro sa pige
de so da pe na de so da me ji me ye ji shi ko ya bu de me ji ya bu se ya du shi shi me ji du ja de sa la wi na to ba da de me ji wa ro
la de
지금은 딱 원해서도 몇 도그때다 도기인보다 야가 이마디 그러면 그게 유익되는 지 메나 또 봐지고 딱 현대 그 양행 남편 제토 말아 뭐 된다서
할때 요구도 스피게
요구 되면 그 또보다 봐지고 봐라 이제 야가다 지도 이제는 야도 몇 야도 방법이 주슈요리 당연히 나서요 어 뒤에 그런 라면 힘을 그게 유익되는 지 메나 또 봐지고 있는
거 유 가사지 유도 뭐 두슬라면 코랭을 유 용도 그 찌 유 마음 발라로 맞아 생기 찌 샘랑 이도 뭐 라면 디기면 두스고 요구
슬라고 이디 용어도 뭐 진짜 타이 이디 용어 요레스 이디 뭐 요레 누자 쪼바들 요로 요르스 요로 나때 그런 유익되는 맨날 이디 뭐다 이디 와 이디 뭐다는 레로로
레도도 와서 디데스
어디에 맞아서 유익되는 요레스 요로
I think the essentialists, the way they think about this is that they said, yes, something must exist objectively from its side, Everything cannot be just subjectivity thing. So when we talk about a handsome and ugly person, right? This is not a matter of you are labeling somebody as, handsome, somebody's ugly. He said, but there has to be something because, something that is handsomeness and something that has to be ugliness there. It has to be there. Otherwise, he said, why can't you call the ugly person handsome, the handsome person ugly, right? It has to be that. He said, well, it doesn't work that way, right? Not how you want to label it, but there has to be something. Somebody is handsome because there's handsomeness from that person. It's not just simply you are calling it, right? Otherwise, you can label the ugly to the other person. It should happen, right? That's what they said. They insist that when we say beautiful, ugly, good and bad, everything, there has to be something from the side of it. It's not just you are labeling onto it, right? So that's what they insist, Any other thoughts? Yeah, sure. Alan. So basically, if somebody we say is beautiful, that person, there's something beautiful from the side of the person. It's not just we call it beautiful or we're good from that, because we know somebody's ugly, right? But there's something ugliness about that person from his or her side, you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so wow,
Yeah.
that's cool. Thank
Follow
you.
up, yeah.
Thank you. So no, not a follow up. Just with the, I don't know how to ask this. So okay, in knowing emptiness and in knowing samsara. So, like, if you like say you're learning a skill or something, just knowing it doesn't really do anything. You have to apply it. So maybe can Geshe give some examples of how to apply the knowledge of emptiness, not in seeing emptiness, but in effect, like making an effect in the world or in somebody's life, and how to apply the knowledge of what samsara is to actually make it do something.
Okay. Kurang disco that nangan to bena kowasiging 가르레스 라버와게 동반이 담에서 가르세도 코치 시험바 삼되게 딱 어디가서 게 팽겨요 말와게 펜이 뭐마게 딩겨요 말와스 다 시험바디 고 좋아 라는 게 베나와게 펜 동반이 고아디 시험바디게 다지 디 고아디 냠len 게 베나 아니지 지소이나 가레나 펜이 되죠와게 펜 코와기나 코와생에 딘데 좀 하고 베나와게 디 시자 연된 디고 좋아 라는 게 베나 아니 지금 펜도 싱그러하게 근데 서로 삼로 땅다로 된다 가르쳐야나 그 지수로 나서 마도 시험 잠기 있고 시험 나로 하게
됐어 다 됐어 코악 베다 코악 베네 코다 베네 제다다 코아지 등에서 시작 인소 등에서 디데 대시 뭔가 너무 가게 디시고 와 그래서 다 등에 옆에 양도 삼니 건설이 된 코알 비조시를 깨는 거니 다 되는 마단 타면서 로제 도로 와 드디어 인수께서 와 다들 타는 거데 다 타랴 그게 예바하고도 같이 인수 여보께서 그 탑이로 때 기자다고 그래봐 그 너네메로 봐 너네메도 타바터도 예지 타바터도 탐도 가고 그래 뒤가서 애는 그 그게 가서 냠을 해야 돼 그게 인수 삼바디 연아 뒤그니 그게 가서 근데 왜 대니야 타로 마다 버도 그 그도로 와셔도 되게 뭐뭐 겁니 근데 되네 다 미드쇼 이모들게 매버려 뭐 이제 내가 사고 와도 니마치카게 로중인데 상어던 듣고 제도 와라 그 니모사 통모매 와 무슨 저 통모매 되는 리더로 와 그래서 딱과 카데자데상 제가 배 레라고 저기 나지 로중인 그때 네 카데자서 야말 저도 단다 제다고미 샥도 되지문데 제제 라바가 마셔 배 튼징이 네 쟤는 트리타도 말이죠. 제제 나사죠 말에. 수보 륜도하죠라. 어때 누자지는 라바도 거마도 쳇딩이 되지는. 민디징이 산에 펜도요 요말죠. 어때 치와죠. 그 검고다. 남도 영한테 최제버서 영 지금 유제로 데려 레레 니도 공부를 검체를 제도 뭐뭐님도 싸운데 저는 야지줘요 와. 그 드리지제 다디 레샤서 고아셔나 양나 사람은 거 야지줘요 말아.
Geshe said that you know, once we have developed that knowledge and understanding, then we really have to cultivate you know, familiarity or intimacy with it over and over in every given situation, you know. Only then the difference would come, you know. Just simply knowing emptiness, let's say intellectual or whatever, or knowing what samsara is, it doesn't really do much, you know. The reason why, you know, even like meditating for a few days or few weeks or 1 year, that doesn't do that much, because we have been in samsara for so long, you know, and we have developed this habit, intimacy with the afflictive emotions, and so much that is such deeply kind of ingrained in us. So to be able to counteract that, we really have to do what called regular and repeated contemplation and meditation with our knowledge and understanding. Only then we will be able to see the difference, you know. The example Geshe gave is like in the Lamrim teaching, we talk so much about suffering of samsara, isn't it? I mean, there is different classifications of samsara. There is 3 kinds of suffering. There is I don't know 18 kinds of whatever. But then we kind of know like okay, there's a lot of suffering. Okay, but we really never bothered to kind of contemplate and think about it deeply. But if we do that consistently, it becomes nothing but natural. At some point, we get fed up with the samsara. We say, oh my, I just can't. I cannot be in samsara anymore. Right? Once we have that, then we are starting to develop aversion to misery in samsara, isn't it? Once we have that kind of feeling, we will naturally try to find a way out. Right? We cannot wait. But the reason is that we really don't do enough contemplation. Right? We just kind of think few days, and then we kind of feel a little moved, and then we kind of forget it, and then we say, okay, there's a lot of some problems in samsara. That's it. So that's why we still are lacking aversion to renunciation to samsara, because we haven't really deeply contemplated and familiarized ourselves with the knowledge of the suffering.
So is that what it does then?
Huh?
So is that what?
Yeah, that's what is holding us back. Right. That's why we still, don't develop the aversion. We want to be free from samsara, but we haven't developed the aversion to misery in samsara. The reason is that we haven't really done the contemplation every day. So we kind of know there's a lot of problems in samsara, and then we get hit by like, I really don't like it. I want to be, but then after a few days we kind of back to the routine, like okay, it's not bad that after all, he didn't say that, but then we move on, and then we get hit like, oh my gosh, maybe I should find the next monastery or something. I mean, he didn't say that. Then we're like, okay, that's just too far. So, any other thoughts? Okay, if not, I have to make an announcement, which Geshe reminded me, and I miscalculated. Lama Tsongkhapa's day is next Sunday. I thought it was next Monday. So next Sunday is the passing away parinirvana of Lama Tsongkhapa, the author of this text. And so it is Sunday, so we consulted with Geshe, and instead of the regular teaching, we will meet at 10:30. And Geshe will tell us the life story of Lama Tsongkhapa, and then we will do the sok offering, the ritual, the fruit. We said feast doesn't mean food, the cooked food, but the fruits and that kind of offering we will do together. Okay, so next Sunday, it's not a regular teaching, but Lama Tsongkhapa's life story and sok offering. So everybody's welcome. Suma sanyima de kendi kandingam jere duwa ken. Kange lo de timye dinde nyinda namda rabsebe chinye dungu chishe siche nije doga leba kanda sebe zera mare mendo dunge si rozo kunla buje daze yanla roje yande ruda chero nyemo nyelo leje charo 동해 뉴고 진예 전제 라디남 데네 다제 사주 다제 연대 렌조 예제 그 주다 주니 예 잠베 양라 요 마라바자나 Amarambazana de Zende Jye Kera Veze Ye Dalu Timo Mimba Kada Denje Shunlu Toba Ye Roje Powe Zendo Ze Roje Kyaze Ujun Bega De Kesan Pongwe Chido Mimba Tenpa Zinla Wando Jishobe Tanye Shukwe So one so could you please do the Manjushri prayer and the song Rinpoche's long life in English first?
To my Guru, the protector of Manjushri, who holds as his heart the spiritual text, simply of seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, clouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches insistent ways with a loving compassion, the mother of his only son, all creatures caught in the prisons of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by the suffering, who, those rendered alone by confirmations of dharma, arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and fears from the chain of our karma, who
tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí, Ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tự nhật quan lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim Ngài Bát Nhã Kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báu, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thù thắng, cùng đại bi Ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tự từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử. Thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp báo, ghim trí tuệ nhà chặt đứt vô minh, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn, trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, Ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân Ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai, đây đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin Ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban phước lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thù thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh Ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lúc Sang Tiên Diên Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Sanje Jindo Mede Viva Yen Dovena Cheva Yo Kare Rave Gove Shingan De Bendan Dewa Mali Jungwe Chenre Sewan Tenzin Gyazo Ye Shave Side Ba Ten Yun Yedan Guru Rana Mandela Niandaya